It is Wednesday, my dudes, and it is the last Wednesday, unfortunately, that I will be getting to say that for these Hawkeye reviews. The finale of Hawkeye aired this morning at 3 a.m., and it was a long one, so I'm a little tired today. But as always, I had to get my review out to you guys. So let's talk about the finale of Hawkeye. Also, for my boy Thomas, this is for you, buddy. Good for you for talking to your girlfriend and getting rid of those Imagine Dragons tickets. If you know, you know. I'm not explaining further. Now to put on my sweater because I'm cold. With last week's cliffhanger revealing Kingpin in the MCU, this week's episode had a lot of ground to cover. Not only to introduce Kingpin to MCU fans who have not watched Daredevil, but to tie up all the loose ends that this season have been heading towards. The Watch. Will Clint get home in time for Christmas? Is Jack the bad one? What is going to happen with Yelena and Clint? Like, there were a lot of questions going into this finale, and for the most part, I think this finale handled a lot of them really, really well. If you were to take each of these episodes and lay them out on a whiteboard, I'm kind of stealing from a Script Notes podcast that I will link below that I listened to about Die Hard, which this finale is extremely reminiscent of and pays a lot of homage to. I feel like you can really see how tight the story is, how well it is paced, how they decided to plant little runners that initially you think are just sort of things, but because it's the MCU, you know they'll pop back up again. But then to see the way in which they pop up is so fascinating, and the way that this series has chosen to deal with everything, I think has honestly worked great. Like, I never would have guessed that keeping Yelena as late of a reveal as they did was gonna work, but to me, this episode had the most emotional payoff in their conversations with one another. So I guess let's start there. One of the biggest through lines and themes of this season has been Clint's relationship to Natasha and how her death has affected him being an Avenger and kind of his family's life and sort of the state of the world post-Endgame. This episode beautifully wrapped that up with Yelena and Clint's confrontation. Not only were Yelena's scenes with Kate the best scenes of the episode, that action sequence, which is simultaneously very Die Hard and Kill Bill, was just impeccable, like so good. I also just thought Yelena's conversation with Clint, and when he whistles, oh my gosh, did that catch everyone? I think everyone that I was watching in the watch party was like crying a little bit because it was so sweet. The only thing about it is I feel like he didn't necessarily beg and explain how close they were, but the whistle said everything, and so I prefer that because that is much more of a show don't tell type of situation, which none of us really would have wanted to hear him sit there on that Rockefeller ice skating rink and beg to her not to kill him. I think it was much more a sign of strength that he was somewhat accepting of the fact that she might kill him, but he could also pull that out at the last moment. So I thought that was just really, really nice, and it makes the scene very balanced in their like power dynamics between one another. But overall, I think Yelena was a wonderful character in the show. I think Kate and Clint have some of their best episodes this moment. Their banter, the words, there was a lot of payoff, of course, that had been set up over the course of the rest of the episodes. I just thought it worked really well. But then there were other times where like things in this episode didn't work that great for me, but none of those had to do with Kate and Clint. We'll get to those in a little bit. I just really think Kate's fight sequences were incredible. I think it felt incredibly earned this episode, her kind of finally getting granted that partner status from Clint, and then absolutely going off on the tracksuit mafia in a way that she hasn't really been able to before, using all of the things that Clint has taught her over the course of the previous 5 episodes. I think was great, and we kind of really just did get to see her martial arts training, her fencing, her archery skills, and also some of those shots definitely, at least to my knowledge, I don't think were like faked in the sense of like putting in a stunt double or an archery double. Like Haley Steinfeld and Jeremy Renner, like the way it looks so easy when they're on the rink and shooting everyone and just grabbing arrows and from their quiver and just knocking them back. It looks so simple, but because it's so simple, you know it's so impressive that they trained to do all of that stuff. So absolutely loved that. Her fight sequences made that title switch at the end, which we all knew it was coming, feel so earned, but I also like that we didn't really have to have that conversation of like, you will be Hawkeye now, because again, too telly, not showy, and I think the way they ended it was just absolutely perfect with her kind of coming up with silly names. Those moments really felt earned. One of the moments that I thought worked particularly well was in her fight with Kingpin, which we'll just go to the Kingpin part of this episode now. If I'm going to timestamp it, this will just be the Kingpin section. I think there are some great parts of his addition into this episode, then some not so great parts. Great parts are that fight with Kate, again, I did not want her to go in there and just be able to like beat up on Kingpin. The fact when she shoots him with an arrow and he just rips it out of his chest, no problem, amazing. And the fact that she had to outsmart him in that fight with the coin flip thing that Clint had taught her a couple episodes prior. Perfect. Like, I love that because I did not want this to become, okay, well, now that she's going to be an Avenger, let's make her way more powered than him. I think that gave a lot to how strong of a character he is and how just physically intimidating he is, because she looks like she's like a rag doll being thrown around in her fight with him, but it works so well and you just see her get up time and time again. And I think that really speaks to her want to be a superhero, and that conversation they have, which was very kind of with great power comes great responsibility-esque in tone. And she's explaining to Clint that the reason she's doing those things is because she was a kid, she was terrified, and she saw a man with no superheroes jump off a building, and like that inspired her to do good. She shouldn't be afraid if someone like him isn't either, because they're virtually the same. I also loved that with Kingpin, with little Willie Fisk, we got to see that duality in him that I think is what makes him such a great villain in Daredevil. If you have not had the privilege of watching the show yet, I beg you to ask for a Netflix subscription for Christmas so you can watch at least some of the first season, because it is so good. And there is such a duality there of a man who is like uncomfortable in his own skin, shy, but he is so powerful and just vicious and brutal. It's very obvious that Kevin Feige wanted to bring that into the MCU from Daredevil, but also props to Vincent D'Onofrio, because I think he just did a great job. But the not so great. And this is kind of like the spoilers of the episode. There's no closure on whether he is or is not responsible for Maya's father's death. Obviously, that's the implication, and the implication is that he asked Kazi, or Kazi informed Clint Barton or Ronan of where they'd be and how to take him down and blah, blah, blah. But I didn't like that we didn't have some form of closure. Like, Maya didn't discover anything. Maya just decided she's not on their side anymore, which I felt was a little unmotivated. I did have to change my battery on my camera, like at that point in the episode when she's battling with Kazi at Rockefeller Plaza. So might not be 100% correct there. But then both of their deaths, we'll put that in air quotes. First of all, just like I said with Kate, I didn't want Kingpin to come in this episode and be just like absolutely like wasted by Clint or Kate. I didn't want him to be just like beaten super easily. And so the fact that Maya just corners him in a dark alley when he's running away and shoots him, when to me it doesn't even make sense exactly why Fisk is there, because I don't know that he's necessarily going to the Christmas party. I can't really tell. It's almost like they're merging in to get Eleanor, and then all of these other things start happening. I do like that they made a central location there, but Fisk, it didn't really have an explanation as to why he was there, and then for Maya to just conveniently corner him and then murder him off camera, which obviously was an intentional choice, was frustrating. And then also Kazi, who is like kind of extremely important, and it's very specific why they would pick that name and that character to then be something else. I feel like both of those characters are going to have such important roles in Echo, and so it feels like for her to kill both of these guys and then go on to her own show where they'll probably be present again, it just feels like those were emotional moments where the episode wanted us to feel sorry for Maya and feel like, oh my gosh, she's like killing these guys, she's taking them out. But I just was distracted by the fact that it was like, obviously these are not gonna stand diegetically, and obviously like it just doesn't make sense that she would just all of a sudden decide she's against them. It would make more sense for her to confront Kazi about it than it would be to just flat out kill him or stab him or whatever she did. So that's all I'm going to say about that, because those are my major gripes with the episode, and I do think the episode is really strong outside of those things. I just think for the narrative world of the MCU, I felt like those were weak points in this episode that will be extremely quickly undone by other properties within the MCU. And that's what's disappointing to see, is it's like, it feels like a cheap play to put it in here to make us emotional or to make us like, oh my gosh, she killed Kingpin, and then for him to like rise from the dead and return in the future, when he could have just very easily like run off back to his tower into Vanessa and just like been fun. The other things that I'm a little mixed on this episode, which I did enjoy the episode, so I want that to be known. Again, the Kate and Clint stuff, specifically when they returned back home at his ranch, made me so emotional, was so sweet. I did not expect to see her come back, burning the Ronin suit and getting the tie-up with Natasha. I think that's the meat of this episode. These are all just kind of like the seasonings that I'm not sure exactly where I stand on them, that make this show that has been particularly strong a little bit weaker. So there is a lot of extra pressure on this episode because it is the finale, but I didn't necessarily like the red herring of Jack. I feel like Jack being the bad guy when he was clearly acting a little villainous and a little like showy when Eleanor is the villain, although I love that Eleanor is the villain. I don't really understand why Jack Duquesne was used in the way he was, to just sort of be some freak that carries a sword around that's like really good with it, and to have him play for a joke with the LARPers. Now, of course, it was no Quicksilver joking reveal from WandaVision that would upset people in that sort of way, but I just feel like a lot of people from the comics know who Jack Duquesne and Swordsman are, and then for it to be somewhat wasted in that way was a little frustrating. Additionally, I feel like the Watch, I can't tell if the reveal of who the Watch belongs to is obvious or not, with it being the Agent 19 or Mockingbird, Laura Barton's past. Again, I can't tell if that is something that like makes sense to me and that we just figured out as a community and that it should be a more shocking reveal than it is, but for it to return home and be hers, like I feel like from the moment she spoke German, all of us were clued in to like they're trying to do something here. So I'm still not sure exactly how I feel about that, but again, I'm always game for Marvel trying to connect all of their properties together, and so this is the way in which they want to do that. I'm interested. That whole situation reminds me of like when a leak happens and then we watch an episode or a movie and then we see the leak part in the movie and we're like, oh, it's not as surprising. It's almost like we've done so much as a community, which I don't think is a bad thing, to like pick apart and theorize. And again, I don't think people have done it nearly to the extent with this show as we did with WandaVision. I think we all learned our lesson. But those kind of things are just a little frustrating because it's like we ruin it for ourselves in a way. But again, like I said before, the main heart and soul of this episode is the Kate and Clint interactions, the agreement of being partners, and just sort of the closure of Hawkeye passing the mantle and getting home for Christmas. I like that we have maintained that level of, again, Christmas, comedy, and action in this finale episode in, I think, what is such a great spectacular. And I also really, really love that, like Die Hard, this show is great, not despite, but because of some of its issues or imperfect parts. Again, I will link that script notes episode because I feel like I'm kind of taking their ideas from that podcast and applying them here. But I think there are so many great things planted throughout all 6 episodes of Hawkeye that pay off in the finale really well. The Pym arrow, the flipping of the coin, the Eleanor's turn to being evil when in the beginning she's like, you don't know what it's like to have nothing, you can't take care of yourself, when really in the end Kate proves that she can maybe do more and be less pressured than her mom. Like, all of that stuff is excellent. And at the end of the day, I just want to give a major props and thank you to the creatives, creators, writers, directors, actors, crew of this series, because this one was just a personally really gratifying series to watch, and I really, really enjoyed it week to week, more than I think any other Marvel show. And thank you to you guys for watching each week along with me, watching my reviews, and just kind of creating that fan community, because as much as sometimes we do pick things apart a little too much for our own good, it is so great to get to talk to everyone and just like dissect the episode. But what did you guys think about this finale? Was it satisfying? Were you a little disappointed? Did you enjoy the Rogers the Musical post-credit scene? Again, I said it in my watch party. Great job to them for creating that whole thing. Don't know that that needed to be the post-credit scene, but also I don't think they had anything ready for Echo. That's just my opinion. Thanks again, guys, for watching. I so appreciate you guys, and a Merry Christmas, since this may be one of the last videos I get up before the day arrives. Have a great day, and I will see you all in my very next video. Bye, y'all.